If you're the type of person who's designing a website and it always ends up in a situation where you're like, geez, this sucks, it looks like crap, I don't know why. Well, this video should definitely help you out. We're going to take this design right here and we're going to transform it step by step into a layout that looks great. And in doing so, you're going to understand, you're going to gain an understanding of why it is your designs that you produce just end up looking subpar. So it's not just one reason, it's not just 2 or 3 reasons, it's more like 8 to 10 different reasons. And so when you have that understanding, does it mean you're going to become a much better designer after watching this video? No, because that takes practice. But if you understand where your problems lie, then you can start to focus on fixing them. So let's get started with this design. Right here we have a desktop monitor. So this whole white area is somebody's computer monitor. Maybe it's a laptop or something like that. So that means we have space available to us to fill out this design. So the first change I'm going to make about this very simple layout here is I'm going to move everything around. I'm going to reposition it. So I'm going to put it right there. All right, so we have a lot of negative space or empty space over here on the right hand side. So what we could do is utilize columns, and columns are important when you're dealing with larger screen sizes like this. So a column is just a vertical arrangement of elements, and a row is a horizontal arrangement of elements. We have a lot of rows. We have a row here on the title, the description, this image right here, and down here is a row, but we only have one column. So let's take this image of the ocean and let's go ahead and just move it over and fill out that right side. So now we have what's called a 2-column layout. A column here and then this column over here. And it's literally established just by the edge of this image going down. So let's continue working on this idea of column and rows. So this right down here, we have a kind of like a countdown, like a sort of like a timer type thing, 3 days, 14 hours, et cetera, et cetera. This would be a great place perhaps to put right underneath this area right here. Does it have to go there? No, but I'm making a subjective, I guess you could say, decision about placing it over here in a 2-row, 1-column layout. So here's 1 column, but we're going to have 2 rows. And so what we're going to do is first, we're going to help define these 2 rows through color. So, all right, we have our row down here, and for now it's just gray. We're going to change that. And now I want to take that time information and we're going to stick it right there in the center of it. So we have equal white space, top, bottom, left, and right. This still doesn't look that great, but at least we're starting to structure the layout a little bit better. So another thing I want to do is talk about color contrast. If I zoom up here, we're going to see that we have this mid-gray color and then next to all this blue. So we could probably take in or change this background color to blue to help the color contrast a little bit better. So if I do that all of a sudden it just looks 1,000 times better. Look at this versus this. It's just way better. But there's still another problem. And this is one of those problems that maybe you're not aware of. But look at the 3 days, 14 hours, 5 minutes, 14 seconds text. It's black on this blue color. It doesn't contrast enough. If I click on this, we're going to make it white. Look how much easier it is to see that. Again, these are things that you may not be consciously aware of when you're designing. So I see a lot of beginner UI UX designers get contrast on their type wrong all the time because they're just not aware of it. So check out this versus this. It's just way easier to see. All right, so next up, we can make better use of the space. That type right here is quite small. So we can ask ourselves, can we restructure this in a different way that maybe will fill out the design a little bit more? We have 2 different things happening here. We have a value, which is a numerical piece of information, and then we have labels, days, hours, minutes, seconds. Well, we can restructure this just into something like this that will really reinforce, which is called typographic visual hierarchy. We'll get into that a little bit later, and I'll explain what that is. But for now, this is a better arrangement for filling out this design and making it more interesting. Now we could also further reinforce the design by setting up 4 columns in the form of cards. So we have low contrast cards that are just the same exact color as the background is sitting on, except I dragged the brightness slider down just a little bit to make it slightly darker. And this helps create and frame the layout a little bit better. You don't have to do it, but it's a decision I decided to make. And I think it does look cool if we compare it before and after. So you'll find there's a lot of decisions when it comes to design that are subjective, meaning they're a matter of opinion. They're not right or wrong. They're just different directions that you can take. And then there are some that are objective, like objectively right and objectively wrong. All right, so objectively right and objectively wrong are the things that you really need to focus on at the beginning. You have to understand design fundamentals. And by the way, just to fast forward, why is it that your designs don't look good? It's because you don't understand these design fundamentals that I'm going over right now. All right, so let's go ahead and keep on making further adjustments. Let's say, for instance, we want to change this background color from white to something else. Now, white, I think, is an excellent choice for this. We have white background with black text. It complements everything very well. However, a subjective decision that I might want to make is I want to make this maybe like a dark mode. So I'm going to take this color right here, this blue, this high contrast bright blue. I take this color right here, I make it the same exact color as this blue, but all I do is I take the brightness like down a lot to where it's almost black. And I also desaturate. I pull out some of this color. So it becomes almost a black, but there's still some blue in it. And this ends up contrasting very well when you're using colors in the same palette, essentially. So let's talk about typography right now. Everything is Times New Romans, which is a serif font. A serif font is not as clean as a sans serif font. There are certainly use cases for serif fonts, and we're going to see one in a little bit. But typically, for this type of layout and this service, it would make sense to use something that's like a sans serif font, like this. All right, so now if you pay attention to the numbers and the letters over here, they went from this to this, and it just looks a lot cleaner. All right, so another thing that we could do is fix this proceed button. Look at the white space or the empty space to the left of it compared to the beneath of it, or beneath it rather. There's almost 3 times the amount. So if we click this, now it's aligned much better. There's a lot more symmetry in the application of the negative space or the white space. So we went from this to this. And if we see this in the context of the full design, it just helps frame the available layout because we're using consistency, which is a UI design fundamental that you need to learn about. So a consistency in terms of how you apply your colors, your white space, your alignment, your type, etc. So another thing that's really important, and I mentioned earlier, is the idea of typographic visual hierarchy. So visual hierarchy right now, if we look at these 2 elements, the title and the description underneath it, there's no visual hierarchy established, meaning it's styled exactly the same. They have the same color. They have the same font. They have the same font size. Everything's the same. You're not sure where to look first. So that's what visual hierarchy is all about. It's about directing the eye and giving certain elements priority through design fundamentals such as scale, font size, color, contrast, alignment, white space. I can go on and on. These are all the fundamentals that you're lacking. So what we could do is ask ourselves, which is more important? Is it the title or is it the description? Well, typically a headline or a title is going to be the element that's more important. You want to grab people's attention with the few words that speaks to them that makes them want to stay on the website longer. So this is what we could do. Make it a lot bigger. All right. We could also increase the line height or the white space between the lines of text. So if you see these 2 changes we just made, we just drastically changed the mood and the feel of this design and the effectiveness. All right. There we go. So that's looking pretty solid. We could also change this headline into a different font. So understanding typography means you can start to experiment with font combinations. So remember when I mentioned serif versus sans serif, we can make this simple headline a serif font like Play Fair Display. Now that makes it just feel a little bit more elegant, maybe a little bit more in terms of luxury, and we're also varying the design. So one final change I would make is just to get things aligned up a little bit better. like this, because we had a little bit less white space compared to the white space over here. Again, these are things that you start to train yourself and train your eye, and you have to think about these things consciously. It has to be on the forefront of your mind when you're developing these fundamentals. Then it becomes second nature, and it's a subconscious act. So that's where practice and experience comes into play to help solidify these design fundamentals. And so really we went from this design right here, which is really not much of a design at all, to this. So from this all the way to this. And we did it by understanding and applying design fundamentals as it pertains to UI design. So if this is something that you really want to get better at and be able to design things from scratch, whether you're a no-coder, low-coder, somebody who uses Webflow or Framer, or somebody who's just into HTML and CSS and doing everything from scratch, definitely check out DesignCourse.com, because the fundamentals is what we really drive home, but we do it in a fun way, in a way that makes sense, and through real practical examples. So definitely check that out. As always, Gary Simon here. Make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.